One. Welcome back to the second session of Beyond Getting Started. And today we're going to look at what's probably the most important concept you need to understand about working with Tableau. And that's the order of operation or the sequence that Tableau goes through when it creates your workbook. We're going to look at both the order of operation and how it affects your calculations. So let's go ahead and get started. It's the process that Tableau goes through every time it creates a worksheet. Now, I like to use this 10-step model. I know other people use a different model, but this is the model that I like to use, and it's the model that we're going to use today. And I like to break down those 10 steps into three different groups. First group include the extract filters and the data source filters. Those are the first two steps, and they operate at the workbook level. Everything else, steps 3 through 10, operate at the worksheet level. And we're going to go into detail how that works. But steps 3, 4, and 5 are used to create the structure for the data table for your individual worksheet. Each worksheet has its own data table. It's a subset of the total data that you loaded into Tableau. Once that structure is complete, we fill it full of data and decide what the business is going to look like. Schematically, this is what it looks like. It doesn't make any difference where you start, whether you're using a database or whether you're using a flat file. The data that you load into Tableau, the full data set, is broken down for each one of your worksheets into something that's a flat file. And I say that it kind of looks like, you can think of like an Excel spreadsheet, for example. It doesn't really look like that. But think when you take dimensions and put them on the rows and you put them on the columns. Those act like headers on your Excel spreadsheet. That creates the structure for that for the worksheet, uh, for the data table for that worksheet. You can then apply filters and you can narrow down that structure. Now, the rest of what we do is just load that structure full of data, values, if you will, and then decide what the business is going to look. Well, let's take a look at where the order of operation fits in and how it's going to affect your advanced calculations. As always, I like to use the Superstore data set. I use that because you have a copy of it. You got it when you got your copy of Tableau. And just some numbers to keep in mind. That data set is about $2.3 million worth of total sales. There's like 10,000 orders in there or 10,000 records in there. And there's 800 customers. In the first two steps of the order of operation, we're going to use data source filters. Also, you could use data extract filters. They do the same thing to limit the amount of data that's coming into Tableau. And if you reduce the amount of data that's actually in the workbook, you're going to improve the overall performance of the workbook. And if you're not going to use the data anyway, why have it in there? Well, let's take a look at this very simple data set. This is our Superstore data set. Once again, we've just got an example here. We've got $2.3 million of sales, 10,000 lines of data or orders in that data set. And the quantity is 3,800 units or 3,900 units. I go over here to the data source tab and open that up. You can take a look at that data set, and this is what that data set looks like. It's that Superstore data. And we can come over here and we can add a data source filter. Come here in the corner and select Add Filter. And now we have a selection that we need to make. We can add a filter. And the filter we're going to add just for today is we're going to take a look at the order date. And we're going to take a look at the year of the order date. And you're probably thinking, geez, I've seen screens that look like this. Yes, these are the same type of option screens that you do when you're using a dimension filter. So we're going to take a look at the year of order date. And I only want to keep the 2023 data. Okay. And you can see now this window says keep 2023. And when I click OK, our view is going to change here just a little bit. And we're going to come back and we can come and open up that file again. And we can see that no longer are we looking at 10,000 records of data. There's only 3,400 records in 2023. And they total about $745,000 worth of sales. That's the only data that's in the book, the workbook right now. Well, that was pretty easy to do. And we have statically created a way of filtering out data. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go one step further and I'd like to take a look at a dynamic way. And what I want to do here, well, first I'm going to go back to this data set and I'm going to remove that filter. I want to show you how to edit or remove that filter. We go up to edit. We can take the filter that we had in there and we can remove that filter. And we come back. And when I do that, you can see we're back to 10,000 records and $2.3 million worth of sales. I want to drop in a calculation. And the calculation that we're going to drop in is this one that you see here. This is just going to return a true or a false. It's a Boolean calculation. And all this LOD does is it says at the customer level, for each customer, total the sales. And if the sales is over $10,000, return a true. If not, return a false. And that's as an LOD expression. So I can come back to our data source here, open up the data source, and we're going to apply a different filter here. Now we're going to go back, and this is the LOD that I just added to the data set. And we only want the true values. Okay, so we keep the true values. Okay, now we can go back to our worksheet, and we can see now where we used to have 800 customers, only 21 of those customers have a value over $10,000 total sales. Next month, when we add more data to the data set, there may be more customers that have over $10,000 worth of sales, and this filter will automatically make that adjustment. Automatically, it's going to determine how many customers have over $10,000 worth of sales, and that's the only data that will be in. But right now, there's 21 customers. They only have 418 orders, and their total sales is $275,000. Okay. Well, that's how you use data source filters. How you can use them in a static sense, or how you can use them dynamically. How you can make your workbook perform more efficiently using data source filters. Now let's go on and take a look at the rest of the order of operations. And we're going to take a look at steps 3, 4, and 5. Now, if you remember, that's group. That's well, first of all, the remaining steps in the order of operations operate on the worksheet level. This happens every time you create a new worksheet. Okay. Steps 3, 4, and 5 create the structure for that worksheet, and the remaining steps just add values into that worksheet. And 3, 4, and 5 are the application of context filters, the calculation of fixed LODs, the creation of sets, and the calculation of top end, and also dimension filters in step 5. This is the area where we see the most user errors working around LOD expressions, when to use a context filter, when not to use a context filter. One very simple rule to follow. If you want your LOD, top end, or set to be affected by the filter, then apply that filter, the dimension for that filter, apply it in context. If you want the LOD and the top end and the set not to be affected by the filter, use it as a dimension filter. Now you're going to see we're going to talk about these. These are sometimes called gray filters or context filters. The dimension filters are blue filters. Let's dive in and take a look at how this one might work. Once again, we're looking at Superstore data. We're going to continue looking at that same data set. And all I've done is I've taken category and subcategory, and we can see our sales by subcategory. And I've put some totals in here. So the total for furniture is $754,000, and for office supplies is $731,000. Technology is $839. But I've also created a fixed LOD. And that fixed LOD just takes a look and it says for each category and for each year of the order date, sum the total sales. And when I apply that, you can see that's that column right here. Right now, the fixed sales for the furniture categories, that's $754,000. 731 for office supplies, and 839 for technology. Now I want to apply a filter, and I'm going to apply that filter on subcategory. And right now, subcategories are a gray filter type. They're in context. You decide whether you're going to put it in context or not right here. I can remove the filter from context and it becomes a blue filter. It's now applied as a dimension filter. Or, and I'm going to put it back into context, it's now applied as a context filter. And if you think about this, the context filters are applied before the LOD is calculated. So let's go back and we're going to filter out bookcases. Bookcases right here are 115,000. And if I filter out bookcases, you can see that the total sales now for furniture category is 639,000. And also the fixed LOD is now that same 639,000. Well, that's because we filtered out bookcases before we calculated the LOD. Likewise, I can come back and I can apply this as a dimension filter. It's now a blue filter. It's going to be filtered after the LOD is calculated. And if I do the same thing and I take out bookcases, we take out bookcases, there's the 639,000 in sales, and the fixed LOD is still our 755,000, 754,000, because this calculation was calculated before the filter was applied. Very often we'll get questions. People will say, I want to write a formula that ignores filters. Tableau doesn't ignore your data and it doesn't ignore filters. You decide when to apply the filter, either in context, so it's before the LOD is calculated, or as a dimension filter after the LOD is calculated. Let's take a look at a couple other things that get affected by the order of operation. And I want to look here at a top end calculation. And I've created a set, and the set is a subcategory set. I want to edit that set just so that we can see what we've got. And all I've done in this set is I've got a parameter right here, select N for top N. And I've decided that I want to do that as a top filter. It could be a bottom filter, but we're going to use it as a top filter. So now this is going to return the top 5, and that's going to be included in my set. It's going to be the in set for the top 5. And you can see here, I've got the top 5 are chairs, tables, binders, storage, and phones. I'm going to do the same thing we did before, except I'm going to filter out chairs this time. And we're going to apply the filter as a context filter before the top N for the set are calculated. So I take out chairs, and I still have 5 categories. It's not chairs anymore. Chairs has been removed because we filtered it out, and now we have tables, binders, storage, machines is the one that got added in, and phones. Okay. And as you guessed, we're going to just use this. We're going to remove it from context, so it's a dimension filter. And now I'm going to take out chairs. And now we only have 4 categories. The reason we have 4 categories now is because we calculated the top 5. We determined which ones were in the top 5. And chairs was one of those. And then we came back and took chairs out after we calculated the top 5. Okay, so we filtered it out after we made that calculation. Well, let's take a look at some advanced calculations and some things that happen when we look at data that's in context. Sorry, I want to go over to a more advanced calculation that we're going to look at here. And the advanced calculation that I want to look at is I want to take a look at 2 things at the same time. I want to take a look at subcategories that have over $5,000 in profit. And at the same time, I want to take a look at the top 5 categories in terms of sales, just like we just looked at the top 5 categories in terms of sales. But I want to add to it this other filter. And I'm going to put this filter in. And you can see here, I've got a filter here that says, wait, at the subcategory level, I only want to see subcategories that have over $5,000 in profit. And at the same time, I've got this subcategory set here, and I've got this filtered, and we're using a top N on that subcategory, so we only want to see the top 5. But you can see we got a problem here. First of all, we're not looking at 5, but we're also got this guy that's sitting in here that's showing that it's part of what we want to look at, but it should not be. It's only got $3,500 in profit. So we got these two things in conflict with each other. And let me show you why we have that. We have that because both the fixed LOD that's set on the profit being greater than 5,000 and the top end are calculated in the same step of the order of operation. And they're in conflict with one another, and it's just plain not working. So we've got to go back and we've got to change these calculations so that we can look at them, one as a uh, dimension filter, and that's going to be our profit greater than 5,000 units, $5,000. That's the same one we just looked at. This fixed LOD greater than 5,000, greater than 5,000. Then to calculate the top 5, we're going to use a ranking function. And I'm going to show you ranking functions later. They're part of table calculations that are last in the order of operation. Okay, so we're going to go down and we're going to create a ranking function. Okay. I want to take a look at this. We want to rank descending, so the highest value is first. We're going to take a look at the subcategory level, the total sales. We want to rank them, the highest being 1 and the next highest being 2, and so on and so forth. Okay. And that's what we see here in this column. And those are our sales and these are our profits. But what will happen here is that this dimension filter is going to be applied here in step 5 of the order of operation. And when we come back and use this function, we say that this rank, which is a table calculation, is less than or equal to the top N, and we've got it set at 5, is calculated after we have already applied the filter for the profit greater than 5,000. So you can see I've got our top 5 here. They all have profit greater than 5,000. So it meets our 2 criteria at the same time. But we had to do it in 2 separate pieces and bring those pieces together. And just so you know, there's 17 subcategories. If we were to take a look and say that we want to see all 17, we're only going to see 6. The remaining 11 categories have values of profit less than $10,000 or $5,000. Okay. So now here we take a look at the steps 3, 4, and 5 of the order of operation. We see what's happening with context filters being applied before top end, fixed LODs, and sets are created, and dimension filters being applied after. We saw how it's pretty easy to get confused when filters are being applied, but the very simple rule is if you want filter to affect the LOD or the top end, apply it in context. If you want the LOD or the top end to be calculated first and then filtered, use a blue dimension filter. I want to move on now to the last 5 steps of the order of operation. And that's where we load the data table with values. We'll do some math along the way. We'll decide what that biz is going to look like. We might apply some totals and grand totals and some table calculations, and we'll complete our biz. Now, the important part to remember is in steps 6 through 10, we're working with values that are in the data table. We're no longer working with the structure of the data table. That was set in steps 3, 4, and 5. In steps 6 through 10, we're now working with the values that are in that table. Let's go down and take a look at include and exclude. Include and exclude are the other two types of LOD expressions. They represent maybe 20% of the total LODs that you'll write. Fixed LODs are going to be about 80% of that total. Include is going to be about 15% of the total, and exclude will be about 5% of the total. Let's take a look at what they do. And I'm just going to write a couple of expressions here. One's an include expression and one's an exclude expression. And I've just got my sales by state and by region. And what I want to do here is I want to take a look at the include. I'm going to take a look right here. I want to take a look at the include state average sales, and that's this value. And all I'm going to do is take a look at including the state, and I want the average sales, and you'll see that, oh, that is the same as just taking the simple average by average sales. Well, it's not quite. This value, average sales, are determined by taking the total sales divided by the count of the orders, or the count of the records, actually. And using the include statement, that is the same value until we get down here to the total. And the total is now the average of these values. The total of those values divided by the count of the states. Okay. Now I want to take a look at the exclude function. What does the exclude function do? And the exclude function, and it's the same function. It says exclude the state or province and give me the average sales. And what it's going to do, it's going to say, well, I'm not going to look at this level. You told me to exclude that level. So I'm going to the next higher level, and the next higher level in my viz is the region level. And I'm going to give you the average sales at that level. And the average sales at that level is the same as the average overall sales. And you can see it's the same for all states, because we're excluding the state itself. We're using this, it's almost like a fixed LOD calculation. And then we can take the average of the include statement and the exclude statement. I know that's a little hard to okay. Let me just find the right percent here. I'm sorry. Yeah. All this does is take the average of the include versus the exclude to get these totals here. Well, okay, you kind of got an idea of what include does and what exclude does. What could you use it for? Well, one of the things you could use it for is to make a very simple bullet chart. We get this question all the time, but I'd like to make a chart, and I'd like to take a look at the average sales, or I'd like to take a look at the sales in in each one of the states, and that's this value that you see here, and that's the value we just calculated using the include statement. And I'd like to compare it to the average overall for the entire region. And we can do that with the exclude statement we just calculated. We separated those into their individual parts. It would look like this. This is the include statement that we just used, and this is the exclude statement. And we bring them together in a dual axis, and they look like this. Let's sync the axes, and they look like that. Very easy way to do a bullet chart using an include statement and an exclude statement. Let's move on to grand totals. And grand totals are applied down here. A couple things you have to know about grand totals. First of all, grand totals are calculated in a separate module or a separate routine inside Tableau. They're not Tableau doesn't look like an Excel spreadsheet where it just looks at cells and it's adding the cells together. Now it goes back to the table, the data table that is formed that's underneath your individual worksheet. And in that data table, it goes back to the conditions that you put on it. What are the dimensions? What are the measures? What are the filters? And it does the calculation for the grand total and the subtotal directly off of that sheet. Now, they're very easy to use, but you can also use some custom grand totals or subtotals that way. And I'm going to show you a couple examples. We can first look at a very simple example. This is just a grand total example. I mean, we can start here, and I'm going to just remove that total so I can show you where it came from. We can open this up and we can take the grand total and add it to the columns. We can also take the grand total, and I'm just dragging it out, and I can apply it to the subcategories. And Tableau is going to provide the totals, and these are the sum of the values that are above it. We can come back and we can decide, well, wait a minute, maybe I didn't want to see those totals. It says total using sum. What if I wanted to see the total by the minimum? And I can apply the minimum here. And you can see this minimum in the total, in the subtotal, is right there. That's at $15,000 here. And this minimum is the $800. And this minimum in technology is at $12,000. And the overall minimum is $800. So you can control right here how those totals are calculated. Okay. Pretty easy to use. We can calculate at the total level or the subtotal level, go across rows or across columns. But I might also want to look at something a little different. And in this example, what we're going to do is I would like to look at my subtotals in two different ways. Here I've got, this is a simple table calculation that just calculates the percent of total for each subcategory. So if I take a look at the overall sales, 12% of those sales for 2020 for furniture, were in bookcases, 49% were in chairs, 9% were in furnishings, and so on and so forth. I might want to look at this differently, and I might want to see in terms of the total. These are the same values here. But what is this total as a percent to the overall sales? The overall $2.3 million worth of sales. And that's what this value is right here. Let's take a look at how we got that value. And this gets to be a little bit complex, so just bear with me here. Okay. And I just want to put this down so that you can see what's going on here. This says that if the maximum subcategory, we're going to look at this column right here, the maximum subcategory does not equal the minimum subcategory. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense now, does it? But there is one place on that chart where this is true, and that's in the subtotal line. So for each one of the subtotals where the maximum subcategory doesn't equal the minimum subcategory. Because if I look at this line, the maximum subcategory is tables and the minimum subcategory is tables. But that's not true here. So if I'm in the subtotal line, what I want to do is I want to take the category annual total sales. So this is the total sales for furniture and divide it by the total annual sales, the 2020 sales overall. I'll get the 32%. Any place else, I want to take a look at the subcategory annual sales, the individual line item sales, divided by the category subtotal. So I'm taking the total of each subcategory and dividing it by the total of the category to get these values. But to get those values, I'm looking at the total of all the subcategories or the category total divided by the overall total for the year. So I can look at that same data two different ways by doing a custom calculation. Now, one more topic that we really need to get into, and this is a topic that could consume a whole lesson by itself, and maybe at some point we'll do it, and that's table calculations. Table calculations are usually, when you first come to Tableau, they're usually the ones you're most comfortable with, because you're working on a data table, and what appears in front of you in the viz looks an awful lot like an Excel table. And you say, well, okay, I know how to go across rows and columns, and yeah, I know how to work a table. A couple of things we have to understand about table calculations, though. They're last in the order of operation. Because they're last in the order of operation, they can use the results from any of those steps that preceded them. So I could use, the results from an LOD expression that's done in step 4. I could use that in a table calculation. The reverse is not true. Because table calculations are last in the order of operation, I can't use those results in anything that appear above that. I can't take the results of a table calculation and use it up in a LOD expression. Now, much like what you would do in Excel, if you think about what you do in Excel, you write a calculation in a cell and then you copy that calculation and you either go across the columns or down the rows. And we do the same sort of thing with Tableau table calculations. One of the issues that we see over and over again with users is they try to take the results of those table calculations and they try to pick them up and use them in another spreadsheet, a summary, or another worksheet. And you just can't do it. Each one of the worksheets has their own data table. And that table calculation is based on that data table. So each worksheet has a different data table, and you can't just pick the results from one data table and put them in another with a table calculation. But you can nest table calculations inside one. Let's take a look at a very basic table calculation. And I just want to take a look at this, how you use a table calculation. We would start, you can create one with what's called a quick table calculation. I can come down here, quick table calculation, and I can calculate the percent of total. And what Tableau is going to do is it's going to take the total sales. It's going to take the sales in each one of these cells, if you will, and divide it by the total sales. And we see here that this is not calculating down the column for the year, it's calculating across the column. And that's Tableau's default. When you first make a table calculation, it's going to default to across the table. We can change that. Right here, we can compute using down the table, or we can edit the table calculation. And this is very useful when we get into more and more involved calculations, as you'll see later. And we can calculate the percent of total down the table. And you can see that yellow highlight is showing us the direction in the scope of the table calculation. And in Tableau terminology, we talk about scope and direction. Scope being how much of the table are we looking at one time? And direction being, are we going down the table or are we going across the table? So we're going table, that's the scope, direction is down. You can see now we've got our percent of total going down, and if we were to go over and drag totals on the overall columns, we'd see that these total 100% going down the table. Pretty easy to use. We'd like to use the same sort of calculation nested inside another calculation. And here's an example where we're taking the percent of total, and this is the same calculation we just looked at. This is what it looks like, and you can find that out just by dragging that green pill over to the data pane, and it'll create this calculation for you. This is the sum of sales over the total sales. And that's these values here. And these are going down the table as we just communicated. And I want to put those inside another calculation. And this calculation is going to calculate the sum of those from the first value to the current value. So this value is the sum of that value and that value. And this value is the sum of that value and that value. And you can nest one calculation inside another calculation, and you can get very, very involved doing that. The way you're going to learn how to do that is by actually spending time and working with table calculations. I want to show you one more table calculation, and this is one that comes up really quite frequently, where users might want to use might want to find out the order or the rank of, in our case, we're going to take a look at subcategory by market segment and how that changed over the years. And I just want to change one thing here. I want to show you the sales. We're going to start here with the sales, and then we're going to come back to that. I've created an LOD expression to determine all this LOD expression does is it takes a look at the year of the order date. Is at the year of the order date level, at the segment, consumer, corporate, or home office, and at the subcategory level, sum the sales. So that creates a level of data in our data set at this level. And we've got all those values now. That's the sum of sales by year, by subcategory, and by segment. Now, what we'd like to do is we'd like to come back and we'd like to rank those. And then we'd like to, and to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to write this table calculation. And all this table calculation does, and rank unique is a table calculation. And we can see over here in the wizard that tells us what it's going to do. It's going to return the rank. And we're going to rank them descending. So the largest number of sales is going to get ranked number one, and the lowest number of sales is going to get ranked accordingly. So we're going to come in and we have to take the sum of that LOD broken down by year, by segment, by subcategory. We're going to rank them descending. And when we do that, we get a series of values. And all I'm doing is done that previously. And now we get values that look like this. And I want to just show you. This is that editor again. We're going down the table. So we're going to get those rankings for each year, each subcategory. And we can see what was the highest ranking sales, the next highest ranking, and 17 is the lowest ranking sales. And then all I've done is apply a color code on that. That says if the rank is 1, I'm going to make it 1 color. Anything else, I'm going to make it another color so that it stands out. Okay. Today we wanted to look at the order of operation. We wanted to take a look at how it affects not just simple calculations, but more advanced calculations. A couple of things are really important. Order of operations is immutable. It's not going to change. It always occurs in the same order. So you're not going to find workarounds around the order of operation. But within the order of operation, you can learn how to leverage when things happen in the order of operation to make Tableau do what you would like it to do. And just like we did here in this last example, we did a calculation, we did a LOD expression that's calculated in step 4 of the order of operations, or step 5 of the order of operations, so that we can look at segment, subcategory, and year level sales. And then we came back in step 10 of the order of operations and use that to create a ranking. And then we could look at that, rank itself. The other thing you need to think about when you're using the order of operations is the steps 3, 4, and 5 when you're applying filters in relationships to LOD expressions, uh, pop in, and the creation of sets. That is the single most frequent error that we see that users come up with, and they say, well, something's not working here. My answers aren't right. It's because they're misapplying filters. They're applying them in the wrong order. Well, that's what I wanted to share with you today. Everything that you've seen today is already out on my blog. You can get to my blog. It's just jimdehner.com, or you can use the QR code. This workbook is already out on my Tableau Public site. You can go out to Tableau Public and you can see it out there. Thank you very much, and it's good talking to you. See you again next month.